Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Delaney, and I'm a staff member of the South Dakota Humanities Council. We produce the annual Festival of Books, and we're headquartered in Brookings, South Dakota. So I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the SDHC. We are so pleased that you've joined us for our virtual 2021 event. We'd like to acknowledge first and foremost that this program comes to you from ground, which is the homeland of the Ochady-Sakowin, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people. The South Dakota Humanities Council honors and appreciates the Indigenous people who have the longest relationship to this place. Before the event gets underway, I'd like to share some housekeeping details. We all love those. We ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the event to minimize background noise. And if you'd like to ask questions or share comments with our presenter today, please type them in the chat section on Zoom, which you can open by clicking on that conversation bubble at the bottom of your screen, or in the comment section on Facebook if you're watching now live stream. We will let Sharon respond to your questions as she sees them, and she's wanting to do that. And so you just go ahead when you have a question, type them in, and she will see them. We encourage you to buy books by our presenting authors at your local independent bookstore. Our official festival booksellers are Books A Million and the Birdcage Bookstore and Mercantile, both in Rapid City. You can also buy directly from authors and publishers. Look for those links, which I'll be placing in the chat. And to help us continue to improve the festival, we'd appreciate your filling out an evaluation form. I'll share a link in the chat section on Zoom, and we'll also email you a link to this survey at the conclusion of the festival. Finally, you can keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. Just visit our website, sdhumanities.org, and click the donate button. The festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who've already donated, and they are all acknowledged on the back cover of the festival guide and on our website. And now on with the show. This program is called To Revise or Not to Revise. Is it really a question? Sharon Grenz Chmielarz was born and raised in Mobridge, South Dakota, attended 2 years at Sioux Falls, then college, and graduated with degrees in German, French, education, and English from the University of Minnesota, where she fell in love with poetry. She has published 13 books of poetry and 3 children's picture books. In May, the South Dakota State Poetry Society named Chmielarz the 2021 Poet of Merit. And you may take it away, Sharon.
Thank you. I still get chills thinking of that poet of merit. Anyway, thank you all for attending. Deb, thank you for setting us up and keeping us going. Nathan, that includes you. I want to thank the South Dakota Humanities. I watched the get together last night on Zoom, and I was really amazed how cozy and friendly we could be on Zoom. There were pictures of photos of the presenters. There was music with it. There was meeting the staff and meeting the librarians in Deadwood who were celebrating with wine and hors d'oeuvres, which I thought was really cool. And there was even a guest appearance by Ann Patchett. And I really thought that was wonderful. Well, I hope some of you did stay or were present for Kent Kruger's talk. I'm just going to pick up one thing that has to do with our work or presentation this morning. One thing that he said, I'll briefly summarize his talk, was about writing for stories, being a storyteller. And he led off with the question, what is the first line or sentence in Genesis? And of course, I thought, I know that, of course. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And that wasn't the answer. The answer was, I want to tell a story. That was the impetus. And I think that is our impetus for writing poetry also. Although it might not be a story, I'm going to do a little bit of shameless promotion here. This book, The J Horoscope, is about stories from Genesis. And I wanted to tell you the story from a female point of view. And that I didn't realize that until he said that last night. That was my impetus. And now to get more to the point of our session together, he says, I want to tell you the story. The first sentence was the first sentence that was written or thought of. And that was the first sentence that was dropped. That was the first thing revised then. So to revise or not to revise, is that even a question? With me, it isn't a question. I've been writing poems for about 40 years, and I had just one poem that I wrote straight off on paper, no stops, just go, go, go. And that proved later on to be the final draft. One in 40 years and 13 books. So I do believe in revision. In fact, revision is my favorite part of writing. I just find it fascinating to see what really lies in the poem, in the drafts that I didn't see in my mind until I could see it on paper. So what I'd like to frame this session in this way today, talking about first lines and talking about the body of the poem and some revision, and then the title, the last thing we tackle. The first line in a poem is very important. It's just like the first line in a children's picture book. You have to attract the audience's attention. If it's a child, the child is going to start squirming. If it's an adult, the adult won't start squirming, but might start doing their grocery lists or their to-do lists for the next day. The first line is terrifically important. It has to catch the attention of the eye and the ear. So I'm going to read 12 first lines, not by me. And I'd like you to use the chat of the one that you liked the best, or the ones that you thought were that really appealed to you. Let's see what happens. I'll read them twice. 1, what was he doing, the great God Pan? 2, today when persimmons ripen. 3, oh cruel love, on thee I lay my curse. 4, this pool, though only chlorine pure, is much preferred. 5, like feeling I'm the inaction of a waterfall by my tongue. 6, another and another and another. 7, we plunge into the cool, huge fakery. 8, the waves were crashing like wild horses. 9, Phyllis, let's shun the common fate. 10, Bedouin children of a one camel clan. 11, she walks in beauty like the night. 12, he says, if you want to love me, go hang my laundry. Now I'll read them over again, but maybe not quite as slowly. And please enter some numbers of title, first lines that really appeal to you. 1, what was he doing, the great God Pan? 2, today when persimmons ripen. 3, oh cruel love, on thee I lay my curse. 4, this pool, though only chlorine pure, is much preferred. 5, like feeling I'm the inaction of a waterfall by my tongue. 6, another and another and another. 7, we plunge into the cool, huge fakery. 8, the waves were crashing like wild horses. 9, Phyllis, let's shun the common fate. 10, Bedouin children of a one camel clan. 11, she walks in beauty like the night. He says, if you want to love me, go hang my laundry. Which of those lines stood out for you? None of them? Deb needs number 7. We plunge into the huge, cool fakery. I need direction to wrap my head around it. We plunge into the, so that would give you impetus to keep on reading then, to see what it was about. From Dana Yost, 1, 2, 6, 7, 10, 12. 1, what was he doing, the great God Pan? 2, today when persimmons ripen. 6, another and another and another. 7, we plunge into this huge, there's another one for 7, huge cool fakery. 10, Bedouin children of a one camel clan. 11, 12, he says, if you want to love me, go hang my laundry. From Janelle, Bedouin children of a one camel clan, yeah. Bedouin children from Paulette Henderson. C.B. Alexander, 3, oh cruel love on thee I lay. 9, Phyllis, let's shun the common fate. Andra Marquardt, 2, today when persimmons ripen, that has gotten more than 1 vote. 8, the waves were crashing like wild horses. 12, he says, if you want to love me, go hang my laundry. Now there's a certain, what is it about those lines that you really liked? The Bedouin children of a one camel clan. Isn't that wonderful rhythm in there? The Bedouin children of a one camel clan. The waves were crashing like wild horses. A wonderful image there. Yes, Dana Yost, very specific images, the music in them. Janelle, cadence, imagery, yes. Paulette, the juxtaposition of the words Bedouin and children. Andra, they all give a glimpse into what's to follow, asking questions that we want answers to. That's exactly what first lines are able to do. I'm just going to tell you who wrote what, and then I'm going to move on to an example of mine. A before and after example. What was he doing? Elizabeth Barrett Browning. When persimmons ripen, which got quite a few votes. 3, oh, cruel love on thee I lay my curse, John Lilly, 16th century. 4, this pool, though only chlorine pure, is much preferred, Fred Dinks. That line really is iffy, I think, because it's quite heavy. This pool, though only chlorine pure, is much preferred. He really went out on a limb there to have that kind of a heavy thing thing, because at the end of is much preferred, you could just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, all right, chlorine period, go on, let's go to the next poem. 5, like feeling I'm the inaction of a waterfall by my tongue. And that has some of the rhythm in it that's indicated by the waterfall and inaction and tongue. And there's an interesting play there between inaction and waterfall and tongue, which are very concrete, but inaction is quite abstract. Another and another and another, James Henry, the same title of a poem. We plunge into this huge, cool fakery by Terry Whittick. I don't know that person. The waves were crashing like wild horses, number 8. Gregory de Jonikian. Phyllis, let's shun the common fate. Charles. Bedouin Children poem was written by Robert Mahinnick. I don't know some of these people, most of them. So I thought it was safe to use the work. She Walks in Beauty, Lord Byron. He says, if you want to love me, go hang. That's really the first line. He says, if you want to love me, go hang. Next line, my laundry. And it's the my laundry that really grabs you. Because all of a sudden, you have an idea of what the relationship is between these two people. Right. Before I go on, does anybody have a line in a poem in your back pocket that you would be willing to key into the chat box and we can look at it? While you're thinking of that, I'm going to go on to some examples from my own work, the whole poem. The first I better say this. This poem was eventually published in an anthology of poems for James Wright. It was some people who knew James Wright were asked to write a poem about him, and then they put it into a book in 2008. Well, I didn't know James Wright as a poet, but I knew him as a professor of Shakespeare. So when I saw that call for poems, I wanted to have something in that book. So here is what I wrote. It's called The Professor. To me, he was Professor Wright. Decades later, my sisters and I cleared out our parents' house for the estate sale. In Dad's desk, I found clipping. One about me. I'd been nominated to Phi Beta or whatever by James Wright, University of Minnesota. That must have been the invitation I'd tossed, thinking it was a sorority after my money in the bank, all $15 of it. I didn't know his poetry then, nor generosity of spirit, nor the inclination planets have toward the sun, how their path throws light on all living beings equally. Now, I took that to my poetry group, and the only response that I got was, torque it. And I didn't know what torque meant, except in some car ads, a car might be able to give, to get from 0 to 60 in 3 minutes or whatever, seconds or whatever it was. So kind of use that as a model. But we were talking about first line, so I want to reread that first line of me again. To me, he was Professor Wright. Now, it has one thing, maybe, if we're generous, going for it. To me, he was Professor Wright. It does have a rhythm. Okay. But it's so flat. To me, he was Professor Wright. All right, you know everything that there is about my relationship with him. You go on to the next poem. Who wants to read any more? But it gets worse, my poem. The next line is, decades later, my sisters and I cleared out our parents' house for the estate sale. In Dad's desk, I found clippings, one about me. The first 11 lines of this poem which is supposed to be about Professor Wright, is about Sharon Chmielarz. But then finally, the last 4 lines say, nor generosity of spirit, nor the inclination planets have toward the sun, how their path throws light on all living beings equally. Now that was something that could be worked on. That is an example of an ending which becomes a beginning. And here's the revision. And I'm not saying this is great. I'm just saying that this is something I wrote back in 2007, whatever, 2006, to get into a 2008 anthology. Remember, my first line before was, to me, he was Professor Wright. 3 times a week he passed by my chair in dusty Falwell Hall. Good, we've got a placement there. 3 times his small planet paraded around the great sun, Shakespeare, in that room, pulling toward the light, picking up underdogs in his orbit, the fairies, Falstaffs, fat girls, drunks, kings of lost kingdoms. 3 times a week we tagged along in that gravity, that fragile path he paced through words and their long comments I couldn't get enough of, though he gave and gave and gave. I'm not going to read any more of that, but you get the idea, right? Just like, who was it? The images, all of a sudden, Dana Yost says, very specific images. All of a sudden, we have some images we're working on that have to do with Professor Wright. There is a metaphor. He becomes the small planet. He is parading around the great sun, Shakespeare. We've got the underdogs that were in Shakespeare's orbit, the Falstaffs, and the fairies, and so on. So I'm telling a story. I'm picking out a small moment in space to give you an idea of what it was like, what James Wright was like in the classroom. And I'm not talking about me, although I am talking about me. How did that go? I once wrote it down. The word me, the word I, the word I has to be a representative of the universal. In the first draft, the word I was a representative of Sharon Chmielarz. In the second draft, the word I couldn't get enough, is representative of a student in a classroom with a masterful teacher. All right. So that's an example of a poem's of a draft's last line becoming the poem's first line. I once heard Linda Pastan, who I think is dead now, but she said the best way to know about what your poem needs or if it's finished is just to put it in a drawer for a couple of years. Now, I didn't start writing poetry till I was in my someplace between the time I was 35 and 40. So I didn't have time to put a poem into a drawer and keep it for 2 years. I mean, it had to go a little faster. So that's probably where a poetry group helped me out. So now let's look more at the body of a poem. This summer, I read a book called A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. I don't read a lot of fiction, but I love George Saunders' fiction. So I got a copy of this book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. And it isn't a fiction book. I mean, it is all about fiction. But it's a little bit like Ken Kruger last night. You know, he said, what he said about, I want to tell you a story. Saunders wrote some things about writing fiction that are just perfect for poets to remember. So I'm going to read you just a couple of excerpts from that book by George Saunders. The idea of a story as an ongoing communication between two minds arises naturally from the activity of one person telling a story to another. And remember, this is an aside now. Poetry is the oldest form. I mean, we may not be tops in selling, but we're the oldest form, poetry and riddles. And what we did 4,000 years ago was tell each other our poems and our stories. So ongoing communication between two minds arising naturally from the activity of one person telling a story to another. This would have applied the first time some cave people gathered around a fire for the first literary reading. And if that early storyteller ignored this notion of story as ongoing communication between performer and audience, he would have found, as today, that some of his audience was dozing off or sneaking out of the cave early in that crouching posture people adopt when sneaking out of a literary event, as if crouching like that will make them invisible to the author, which, believe me, it doesn't. I love his humor too. So maybe not in the beginning when we write our first drafts, but somewhere along the way, maybe towards the end, we have to remember that we really would like to connect. Like E.M. Forster says, only connect with a person or persons out there, that we're not just solo, but we are representative of something that could be shared among many people. Back to Saunders. The exciting part of all of this to me is that we always have a basis on which to proceed. The reader is out there and she's real, she's interested in life, and by picking up our work has given us the benefit of the doubt. All we writers have to do is engage her. All we have to do is value her or him or them. And this is where the momentum comes into a discussion of revising the body of the poem. He describes every sentence as a line, which really surprised me. But each line must prepare for the next line, the next line, the next line. And I think he got that from poetry, because poetry builds line by line by line. And the stanza is maybe like a paragraph where you take a deep breath and you keep on going, furthering the poem. So the poem begins with the strongest line possible, creates the setting, hooks the reader, listener. That's a lot to do. From there on, every line gathers in intensity, builds until the poem reaches the last line, which one hopes makes at least as big a punch as a cartoon's caption, as Howard Nemeroff used to say. I read poetry not only for pleasure, but also to study how lines gather momentum. Sometimes this is a real handicap, because I'm sitting there and I begin to study the poem instead of just listening to it or reading it and enjoying it. But as a poet, I hope, I want to always improve. sometimes, as I said, the poem's last line may become your first line. And then the poem makes you work for the real last line. And sometimes by working, I mean, it makes you search, it makes you go deeper than the real last line, than the real, for the real ending, not just a summary, not just a summary, but that aha. And sometimes the last line was present all the time, only it was in a different place in the poem. Revision means re-seeing the poem, no matter how strong a poet you are. You are like a tennis player who can never take his eyes off the ball. Even if the players are at Wimbledon, they still have to keep their eyes on the ball. And I feel that same way about poetry. So here are just a couple of checks that we need to check ourselves on. You've heard about Hemingway's shit separator, I think, maybe. Within the brain, you're going along on your first draft and you're really into it and you're really feeling good about it. And then the next day coming in, and after that, like this has happened to me 1,000 times. I think, oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. So I have to go do something else that day. I put it to the side and come back the next day or 4 or 5 days later. And I think, this has some problem here. And that is the shit separator stepping in. That is the part of your brain which is making you look at the poem in not just a loving image, but finding some things that could be improved. As Samuel Johnson said in the 18th century, read over your compositions, and whenever you meet a passage which you think is especially fine, strike it out. I know that children's book writers had something similar to that. They used to say when they brought their stories to their group, writing group, they would say, kill the mother. Get her out of there, that fine, good person. And we have to have that same separation also, because I wish I had it. I had to kill a line a couple days ago. I really liked it. I mean, I really thought it was good. And then I realized, no, it isn't. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm so fine. Get rid of it. Another thing, if you have trouble with a poem, maybe you could find out what the poem wants to be. You know, you have to find out what the poem wants to say and not what you want to say about it. But also, a poem may want to be in a different form than the one you have it in. Usually when I write, it just comes out as a block. You know, here's a line with about 8 words on it. Here's a line with 3, whatever. But maybe that poem wants to be in a couplet. Maybe it will help you if it's in a couplet. When you do couplets, you have to throw out lines because you have to make this decision, which line is really pushing the poem forward. Maybe it wants to be a sonnet or a pantoum. About a year ago or something, I wrote a poem about bread in a bakery, and a small magazine accepted it. And I kept looking at that poem. I thought, that poem really has 3 or 4 lines that keep repeating themselves. I bet it wants to be a pantoum. So I spent days revising it. I mean days, because I had to count lines. Maybe it wants to be blank verse. Maybe it wants to be a ghazal. Maybe it wants to be a sound poem. These are the last 5 lines to, maybe it wants to be a micro poem. These are the last 5 lines to Jennifer Carmine's work and ode for the human microphone. The human micro poem. We're going to do one right now. I'm going to say a line and then you repeat it after me, and we'll do a micro poem. This is Jennifer Carmen's, whoever she is. I want to have something to say. I want to have something to say. You repeat it. About my own destiny. About my own destiny. Something I care about. Something I care about. Something of value. Something of value. Something important. Something important. Maybe it's not important to the UN, but it's important to us as the poets. All right, let's end with the title for the time being. Titles are at the end. I mean, in this discussion. Titles are sometimes the most difficult to find. We might sling something at the beginning of the poem, but it might not be right for the poem. And it is almost always the last thing that I discover about the poem. What is this poem about? What gives it away? So again, because we don't have too much time, I'm going to read you 12 titles, and I'd like you again to choose which ones you like the best. Which ones give you insight into the poem that's you wrote, or the poem that this person wrote. Number 1, Your Old Lost Loves. Remember, these are titles. 2, Circle of Life. 3, The Weaver. 4, The Red Sleep of Beasts. 5, Rambo to Flambeau. 6, Natural Duty. 7, On the Way to the House of Dreams. 8, Ask Me Who I Am. 9, Litany 2. 10, The Refugees. 11, Their Eyes. 12, Vermilion Hands. I'll read them one more time. Thank you, Paulette. She already has a favorite, On the Way to the House of Dreams. That is nice. All right, 1, Your Old Lost Loves. 2, Circle of Life. 3, The Weaver. 4, The Red Sleep of Beasts. 5, Rambo to Flambeau. 6, Natural Duty. 7, On the Way to the House of Dreams. 8, Ask Me Who I Am. 9, Litany 2. 10, The Refugees. 11, Their Eyes. 12, Vermilion Hands. All right, Dana Jost, Ask Me Who I Am. Anybody else has found a title that especially appeals to you, that you think will lead you into the first line and into the poem, or make you want to read the poem without even looking at the first line? The Weaver. Thank you, Janelle. Their Eyes. The Red Sleep of Beasts. Yeah, and On the Way. While you guys are typing in, I will tell you where I found these. The first 12 lines, the first 12 examples I read are purely white. These are all from this book. It's a really nice book. Now, anthology. Joy Harjo has a really good anthology out of Native American poems, and Haidt Erdrich does too. But this book was done a long time before Haidt Erdrich's book. And it's called Traces in Blood, Bone, and Stone. And it's just a wonderful introduction to many writers that we might not usually run into. So anybody else? Going, gone?
I'd like to jump in here. I'm sorry, and let us know that our time's nearly up. Encourage Sharon to answer one more question or share final thoughts. We've got 7 more minutes, but just kind of keep your eye on what's going on and keep going. Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to say one more thing about, thank you, Andra. She said, this is fun, thank you. You never know, because you're out there in cyberspace, you can't tell as if you're in a room with people, you can't tell their body language or anything. So it's kind of like talking to yourself in a closet. But I'd never read one title that is in another language. And when you get to that kind of an idea, I wouldn't dissuade anybody, but I would make sure that most people would be able to understand the language. The title that I had in mind was written by Wilfred Owen during the First World War, Dulce et decorum est. It's sweet and the thing to do to go to war, get killed. And everybody knew that phrase, or almost everybody knew that phrase in 1914, beginning of the First World War. So that's the caveat I have for you. Are there any other questions or comments? I want to say that if something does occur to you, I have in my website, www.sharonchmielarz.com, a place where you can contact me. So Deb writes, when I compose something as simple as an email, I go over it again and again, making changes before it says exactly what I want it to convey. How do you know when to pull the trigger and stop? And do you ever go back after a poem has been published and regret not using a better phrase or word, etc.? Yes, to the second part of that question. In fact, in books that have been published, I've written in revisions, if anybody were to look at it, of how I would have said it, what would it be in a better form, or not form, but phrase. When to stop? When you get sick and tired of working on it. In an email, when I go over things too, I stop when I see that I haven't got any more mistakes in spelling, or that the computer hasn't corrected a word to another word that I don't want it to have. So that's when I stop. I also stop when I realize when I'm not only that I'm sick of it, but maybe I'm not sick of it, but I know that I'm not getting it. So I do put it away. And I keep my work like on an assembly line. When I get stuck at one place, I just go on to another poem and work on that for a while, or be spending some time in my journal and writing on that. I would like to say a word about riddles, since there aren't any other questions here. My latest book is about riddles. It's in ancient form, and it's probably found in every culture there is on earth, or has been. And riddles love metaphor, they love double meanings. They love peculiarities, the common seen from a different slant. You can find a riddle that's 1 line long to 2 pages long. In a poem, I never know what the ending is going to be. I might think I do, but it probably isn't. But in a riddle, I know what the ending is. It's the thing I'm going to describe. It's the solution. So riddles usually go by numbers. And then you have in the back of the book the solutions to each numbered riddle. And that is a big difference between writing riddles and poems. They also like to use occupational words, like the word header. I had an aunt, Bertha. Who doesn't have an aunt Bertha? Somebody who isn't from Northern Europe, I guess. And she would laugh at me because I really didn't know what a header was. We lived in town. But I've consoled myself over that recently, because my aunt Bertha wouldn't have known what a mouse was. I mean, she wouldn't know what the furry little animal was, but she wouldn't know what the mouse is on the desk. And the header, you could use that in many ways that it has nothing to do with a header on a combine. So, questions, comments? I will tell you who wrote those titles. Your Old Lost Loves, Timothy Blazer. Circle of Life, Shirley Brozo. The Weaver, Artie Medina. Red Sleep of Beasts, Louise Erdrich. Rambo to Flambeau, E. Donald Two Rivers. Natural Duty, Gerald Weisener. On the Way to the House of Dreams, Turtle Heart. Ask Me Who I Am, Cheryl Manema. Litany 2, Jameson Matto. The Refugees, Lindegard Grover, and Their Eyes, Pauline Danforth. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for choosing to join this session.
Thank you so much, Sharon. On behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, we want to thank Sharon Chmielarz for sharing her experience and her expertise and everything. Thanks to all of you on the Zoom and Facebook audiences for attending this event. I will put again our link to the evaluation form in the chat box if you'd like to run over there and jot down something on this session. Don't forget to visit our website, sdbookfestival.com/virtual, for more great programming to come through the virtual 2021 South Dakota Festival of Books. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.